Well, folks, thank you for tuning in to this newly branded episode of the Drew Dekes Show. My first episode here as I kind of get back into things on my YouTube channel. So thank you all for tuning in. My first guest today on my first show, I've had this in mind forever that it was going to be you, Kyle. So thanks so much for coming on as always.
No problem. I feel that, as we've gone through this time over a year now into this pandemic, the big question is, what are you going to get out of this? What are you going to look like? What kind of person are you going to be going through this process as we all go through individually? And the fact that you've got this brand new setup, it's like you're a new man, Andrew. It's looking very sharp.
Yeah, I've tried to take strides. I feel like I've been one of those few that's been fortunate to try to make something positive out of a negative situation. So, yeah, I appreciate that, man. It's been over a year. We talked about a year ago, actually, right on this channel for the first time publicly. I mean, you and I have been friends for a few years here now, but I guess we'll start right off the top with some hockey talk, Kyle. And you're right in the middle of it, of course, in this season on the Canadian side, doing your Hockey Night in Canada thing. And how's the experience been for you? I guess we'll start with the most obvious, without fans.
Well, I got my first taste of it doing the playoff bubble last summer, right, between Toronto and Edmonton. And I'll just say it, I did not get used to it then, and I'm still not used to it now, right? It's just a completely different experience, with no atmosphere. Certainly, I think as the years have gone, or as the season has gone on, the in-arena audio people have gotten a lot better and working the augmented crowd noise in to at least, give something there. So it's not just game noise throughout play. So, but it's just been, it's a challenge in every sense, just like whatever you're doing for the most part in your life, it's an adjustment right now with everything that's been going on. But I'm fortunate to be able to be in the buildings to do my role as a rinkside host and to be able to be watching these games. And, the players, given how much of a grind this year has been, are still gutting it out and putting on a pretty good show most nights. So I feel very grateful for that sense, but no fans, it's not the same. And man, when you look at what's going on down in the States, as the capacities are starting to get more and more, you just look forward to when that day arrives here, when it's the right time and the safe time to do so.
Well, is that possible that we could see fans return in Canada in the coming months? I know it's still a big question mark based on where we're at, but does the NHL, or do you get any sense from anybody that even any capacity, any percentage, 20%, anything like that could return for fans in the playoffs in Canada?
I mean, there's people that are way more plugged into this than I am, but just from my interactions and conversations, there's nothing that suggested that's the case, right? Like it was only a few weeks ago that Elliot Friedman was reporting on headlines that they were at least looking at the possibility of, all the 4 Canadian playoff teams going down and forming a bubble of their own in the States. And then they were already down there for whenever you get to the third round, and then play at a neutral site from there. So to think that was at least being considered, I don't think it's going to be there. The hope is that, at least for the first two rounds, the Canadian teams play in their own buildings. But the fact that was at least being talked about certainly suggests to me that we're a long ways away from, having 2,500 people in Scotiabank Arena or at Rogers Place in Edmonton. It just seems like we're a long way out from, where we are in the vaccine rollout. Certainly that's been moving quicker of late, but with the rise in case numbers and everything going on, the stay-at-home order in Ontario, Quebec still has a curfew. It just seems like a really tough picture to envision right now to have fans. And so I think the big thing that they're trying to sort out right now is when they do get to the third round, what's that going to look like? Or the American team, are they going to be able to come across the border and play games in Canada, or whoever emerges as the top 4 out of the north, are they going to have to find a neutral site down south to play the remainder of the postseason? So that seems like the more pressing issue right now. I would be very surprised if there were any allotment of fans allowed in the building in Canada this postseason.
And how much are you and the crew looking forward to when that day does return, where fans are in there? I know that it's like you said, it's still not the same for anybody, not just the players.
Yeah, it's what makes all of it so fun, right? I think back, I know we've talked about this before, Andrew, and especially when you get to the playoffs and walking into the building 2.5, 3 hours beforehand, and there's already some sort of energy and electricity in the air. You know something cool's happening. You know, more people in the building than there normally would be for pregame warmups, because everyone wants to catch a glimpse of, you know, what's to come, and the atmosphere that surrounds all of that. Like, you can't duplicate it anywhere else or in any other way. So certainly when you get to that point of the season and you rely on that to kind of get your own juices flowing and get you pumped up before you know, delivering something on camera or whatever you're doing on the broadcast, and certainly for the commentators too, to just, you know, help influence, you know, their flow throughout the game, to ride the wave of the crowd and the oohs and ahs throughout play. You miss all of that. So I mean, man, we can't wait to return to that day, and certainly it's not all going to happen at once. But yeah, we're certainly thinking about potentially having that somewhere down the road. I mean, it's just too bad that at least in Canada, it's not likely to happen until next fall at the earliest.
Well, it's crazy, because if you look at a lot of the American arenas right now, I mean, some of them are talking about going full capacity, which like doesn't even really compute if you think about it.
Right. And I mean, I remember watching the Texas Rangers opening day earlier in April, and against the Jays, and over 40,000 people in there. And that was just like making your skin crawl a little bit, because it just didn't quite feel right. Now, certainly, you know, the US is a lot farther along in the rollout than we are. But, you know, so long as the local health authorities are giving it the go, and they feel they've got, you know, enough people fully vaccinated that can be done, then that's what we're all aiming to getting back to, right? So if they feel it's safe, then good on them, right? Certainly the league isn't going to stand in the way. It's an opportunity to generate more revenue in what's been a very difficult 13, 14 months now. And so again, so long as it's the safe thing to do, and it's not totally revenue and the opportunity to make more money that's driving things here, then you know, good on them, and great for the players to be able to play in front of that.
Well, speaking of, well, this is a different subject altogether, but it's been since 1979, Kyle, and you know, we might be looking at a prospective Montreal-Toronto matchup in the playoffs, and even that doesn't compute in a way, just because it doesn't seem real. You know, the whole experience of watching hockey again this year just straight out isn't the same still. But what do you think about the prospect of this actually happening after all these years?
Really exciting, and again, bittersweet, because you'd love to have buildings full. Like, you imagine Toronto coming into the Bell Center for a playoff game. I mean, it would just be absolutely off the charts. Or, you know, I love those games during the regular season, especially the last couple of years, where there were some moments that both teams were going well, and there was a possibility. I mean, you knew Toronto would be a playoff team, but Montreal was looking like they were going to be one too, and it just added so much more to the hype and just the energy and the weight around, you know, just one of 82 regular season games. And I can't even imagine what that would feel like in the playoffs, because you've got, you know, almost a couple of generations of both Leaf fans and Habs fans that have never experienced that before. Certainly they've been told about by their fathers or grandfathers about, you know, how they used to play all the time, and the rivalry, and they've seen all the old photos and what the history is between these two teams. So if that's what ends up happening, and it certainly looks like that'll be the case, even though Montreal is doing everything possible, it seems, to take this playoff race for fourth right down to the wire here. But if that ends up happening, it's going to be fantastic for the game, fantastic for, you know, selfishly us as broadcasters to be able to show that to viewers watching at home or wherever they watch from, and just a wonderful opportunity to see a rivalry that had been going on for so long, but really it was more so talked about like it was, you know, almost romanticized, and that, well, this is what it used to be, and to have some, you know, more recent juice and fire pumped into the rivalry here with a potential playoff series. What a treat that would be.
Well, it would kind of just rekindle that rivalry, because it seems like it's been missing for a while. That fire, that sort of, I don't know if hate is a good word to use, but that healthy sort of competitive hate.
Yeah, and that's where you get it, right, in the playoffs. So, you know, you talk about as much as you play divisional opponents in the regular season, and certainly in a year like this one where you play them a bunch, It's just not the same as a best of 7 when your season's on the line, right? That's why the Battle of Ontario was the best of the best in the early 2000s, and why it hasn't quite been the same since, because they haven't been in the playoffs, and they've gone through stretches where one team has been good and one hasn't been good, or they both struggled. It just hasn't been the same since, and certainly there's been a lot of that between Montreal and Toronto of late. So the fact that they're on a collision course for the first round, I think that's when you get the fire back again.
Did you get a good glimpse of, I think Habs fans would like to know, because only so many people can view games in person right now. Did you get a good glimpse of Cole Caulfield either in practice or during the game recently?
Yeah, it's tough to miss the smile on his face, and clearly the energy and the confidence that he has. So again, as we speak here, Andrew, is still a very small sample size for him, but he's going to be an effective player for them. There's a reason why there was all the hype around him, and just the goal scoring prowess that he's created and become known for already. Just 2 years out of playing college in Wisconsin, and near felt unanimous that he was going to win the Hobey Baker Award this year with 31 goals in 30 games. Good for him. He's got a hell of a shot, and certainly as he adjusts to the league and the speed of it. I mean, it's tough coming in this time of the year where everyone's buckled down defensively, and playing a team like Toronto that's gearing up for the playoffs. It's tough to find room out there. But he's going to learn and adapt as he has at any other stage of his life, where maybe he goes in and people are looking at him going, well, can he really hang with these group of players? Being a smaller stature guy, and he's passed every test to this point with flying colors, and he seems like a guy that's going to be able to do the same here at the NHL. So the future seems very bright for him.
Big task for Dom Ducharme this year as a first-time NHL coach, and just the Habs are still pretty banged up right now. We've got Carey Price still down, Tatar, Byron out, Jonathan Drouin taking a leave of absence an undetermined amount of time, and really not the best time of the year for this to happen when they're trying to make this final push for the playoffs. So even with the Habs healthy, how do you think they fare up against a Toronto team that really, if you watch them lately, they just look poised to finally break through in the playoffs here?
Yeah, they certainly do. And until they do it, you don't know for sure, right? But it's been, a real puzzling year in that sense. And clearly, injuries have been a factor, Andrew. And, though unfortunately for them, the run-in with the virus wasn't nearly as serious that, a team like Vancouver went through. But, having that week off really did backlog their schedule. It was busy enough as is. And, the fact that they've been playing, virtually every second night or more so for the last month or so, it hasn't made that easier at all. Like that's tough to do over a long stretch of games. So fatigue, I would imagine, is a factor too. But it's been puzzling though with this team, because I thought going in that maybe they weren't going to finish top in the North Division during the regular season, but I thought they had a team equipped to do some real damage in the playoffs and the depth that they had. And maybe they get on, finally catch fire and get on a bit of a run and give Toronto a scare here. Who knows? But I mean, if you're a betting man, there's no team, if you look at the division, or at least in the first round here, if you're Toronto, you're going, whether it's Montreal or if Calgary somehow gets back into the mix and takes fourth, like there's no team there that you're looking at and going, we should really worry about. The big question for me, if that does end up happening, is what kind of Carey Price are we going to get? That seems to, it's always is the factor when we get to the playoffs. But if he can steal one on the road early, then you're looking at, okay, do things start to tighten up here? And maybe the belief grows a little bit. But the fact that I know certainly they're missing their lifeblood, their heartbeat in Brendan Gallagher, but the offense drying up the way that it has, it is concerning for me. And I know it's just they've struggled to score, and they've struggled to put 2 wins together for a long time now, as you know. And this has been a long runway now that Ducharme has had the reins here, and it just hasn't clicked yet. And hopefully for them it does, because I do believe in the players that they have, and I like the roster construction, especially when you get to the playoffs. But as I said, it's been a little bit puzzling and concerning as well that they're still kind of muddying through the waters here the last little while, with taking into consideration that there has been some injuries down the stretch. I just thought that they would have been able to power through a little more and at least get on a bit of a run here, heading towards the playoffs and lock it down.
Well, Brendan Gallagher is a player I failed to mention there, which is a kind of an important piece to the Canadiens right now, and a little bit, the heartbeat of the team, what have you. So that's why I'm curious. When everybody is healthy, I mean, I know Gallagher will try to drag them all into the fight in terms of a playoff series, but do they have enough? And they do have a newly constructed roster if you compare it to recent playoff runs and whatnot. So I'm just curious, when they are healthy, what chances they'll really have against, like I said, a team that really needs to get through that first round.
Right. It doesn't look good right now, right? I mean, you saw the way they played on Wednesday. That it didn't seem in doubt at all that who was going to win that game once Toronto grabbed an early lead. They pretty much they seemed in control most of the night, and so it's the odds don't look great for them if this what is the matchup that ends up happening. But that's the beauty of the playoffs. Like, until you get in and you start playing, you get a game in, and maybe after the first couple, and there's adjustments that are made along the way. It's a different animal. And I wonder if a season like this, where you have played that team, 9-10 times during the regular season already, does that change the feel going in? Maybe a little bit, but players know it's a completely different level, completely different sense of intensity and energy once the postseason rolls around. Now, again, you're in empty buildings, so the atmosphere that you're used to feeding off of isn't going to be there. But certainly the heightened attention to just knowing that your season is on the line, that all goes into it. So as I say, my big question is, what kind of Carey Price are we going to get, assuming he is back healthy and ready to go in time for the playoffs? Because I think that's the one way that you really put a scare into this Toronto team, that he shuts the door and you find a way to get a couple, because you can't go shot for shot for them offensively. That much is clear.
Now, the Calgary Flames you mentioned there, they're the only ones that seem to be the threat to bump the Canadiens from the final playoff spot here. Could the Flames catch the Habs?
Yeah, I mean, mathematically they could. Mathematically, Ottawa could catch the Habs if things got really wonky, right? But I just don't see it happening again. Because good on them for beating Edmonton and hanging on there last night for Calgary. But again, they're just another team that hasn't shown any sense of if we could just get one bounce here, one bounce there, we could really get on a run. They're a team that's struggled out of the gate, really, and haven't really found a footing. I think they won their first 3 games under Sutter after the coaching change, and then it was back to more of the same, right? So obviously, without Noah Hanifin the rest of the way is a big loss for them on the back end. I just don't see them as a team that's going to be able to get on a run here all of a sudden in the last few games and really put a scare into Montreal as they're still trying to find their footing. Seems like it's still going to go down to the last couple of games before there's finally an X next to somebody's name. But I would be very surprised if Calgary came out of the woodwork here and next thing you know, they're in the 4 spot.
Well, let's go into possible dark horses in the playoffs. Now, this could apply to Canadian American teams. And again, even as a fan here, I've found it hard to follow along with the American teams because there's just been such a big focus on the North Division. It's maybe a one-time experience for all of us as Canadian hockey fans. So, but even if you had one on either side, do you think that there is a dark horse for the playoffs that you envision at the moment?
Yeah, I would say, I don't know if they'd be considered a dark horse just because of their recent success the last few years, but I would put Boston into that conversation only because I believe they're 4th in their division right now. They went through a lot of change in the offseason, and Chara and Krug leaving, and 2 really big pieces of not only that roster but just that locker room and the culture that has been created there the last decade plus. And so there was some adjustments and some growing pains, and Tuukka Rask hasn't been healthy the entire year, and so that's one for me where they seem like now, just in some of the games I've caught glimpses of, they're starting to come along. And I certainly, a team that's led by Bergeron and Marchand, and now McAvoy coming into his own. I do not count those guys out ever. I had the pleasure of covering them for all of their playoff series between 2018, 19, and 20 in the bubble. And you certainly know that they're a team capable of doing some damage. So again, I'm looking at more just what the standings are right now as a potential dark horse. And that's the team for me that, again, despite all the change and how good some other teams are looking down in the US, I think they can be easy to be forgot about. Mind you, they did go out and grab Taylor Hall at the trade deadline. But they're one for me that, once they get in, they're capable of going on a bit of a run, because a lot of those players there have been around and know how to win games at that time of the year.
Well, it's so true though, because even losing some key pieces as they have, I don't like the name, the perfection line. I don't like the name of that for some reason. They're really, really good. But I mean, my gosh, like, we're still talking about human beings here. Like, settle down a bit. No, but that's easy for me to say as like a bitter rival fan. Right. But the truth is the Bruins do know how to win. Like, you can't take away experience. Right. And it's very clear that experience is a major factor in why you believe in this team still.
Totally. And that's exactly it. You never feel that they're a group that gets a little rattled when, some adversity comes their way. You trust those in the locker room that are there to handle that stuff can do it, right? They've done it in the past, and I thought, they were a team that was primed to, make up for the heartbreak in 2019. They were rolling that way in 2020, and then, the pandemic hits, and your momentum comes to a halt, and they just couldn't quite find it again once the playoffs rolled around, right? Like, got through Carolina in the first round, and they just ran into a Tampa Bay team that it was their year to win it, and they couldn't quite. They didn't have the response, right? But certainly was not for a lack of effort and lack of execution on their part. It just ended up not happening for them. So as I say, I got a lot of respect for the culture that they've created there, and certainly for Bruce Cassidy as a coach. So again, I'm not counting them out in any sense. Once things get rolling, they have a chance for sure.
Got to go into the Ottawa Senators here, Kyle, because I mean, you're stationed in Ottawa a lot of the time, and you really get to see a lot of this team and how the progression of the rebuild is going. It looks like it's taking shape, so that's why I've got the title here. So what have you seen from the Sens team this year that really encourages maybe fans that the rebuild is in fact really taking a big stride here?
Well, what encourages me is that if you look at the group of young players that going into the season, you hoped would take a stride forward, really, outside of maybe Eric Brandstrom, who still struggled to really take hold of a spot in the lineup here, everybody else has either met or exceeded expectations incredibly this year. And, the reasons why they have been winning games has been because of their play. It's not the fringe veteran pieces that Pierre Dorion went out and got either through free agency or through trade. If anything, those guys, I'm not going to group them all together, but it was, more so the older players at times that were proven to be liabilities. And it was, the Josh Norrises, the Drake Bathersons, Brady Tkachuk, Tim Stützle, as he's found his way as a rookie. Like, they've been the ones that have been driving the bus. They've been the ones that have been game breakers here. And certainly Thomas Chabot from the back end. And even a guy like Artem Zub has been, a very nice find for them as well, and a very pleasant surprise this year. So that's what has to excite you as a Sens fan going forward, where you look at the young core and you go, yeah, we've got a lot of good stuff going here. And if there was any questions about whether they were ready for the jump to the NHL full time, there aren't any anymore. So I look at that, and I think there's a lot of positives to be taken from there. The other part of the equation, obviously, goaltending, and it was really unfortunate, just as Matt Murray seemed to be finding his footing, getting back from that first injury. Now he's hurt again, and it seems like it's up in the air whether or not he's going to play again this season. So that was the one thing that you were really hoping for down the stretch here, the final 6 games or so, is to have him find some sort of groove again and have that confidence and good feelings going into next year, instead of the question all summer of, well, geez, like, is he really going to be a goalie that we can trust? He looked a lot like the goaltender that had done so well in Pittsburgh for a lot of years over the last little while before he got hurt again in Vancouver. So beyond that, I just find, the big question is, what is Pierre Dorion and his staff going to surround these young players, right? Like, you've got to find the right mix in there. You need some guys that have been around, but they've also got to be able to contribute in some way too, right? Because I believe at some point here, I know the rebuild has taken some time, and it does come with some patience that you need to have along the way. But, you look at the last 3 years, 30th, 31st, and 30th. Now, this little run they've been on the last little while has vaulted them up the standings a little bit, at least out of the bottom 2. But at some point, you got to take a step here and decide that you're going to, you think, at least have the shot to contend for the playoffs. And I think for them that has to be next season. So it's going to be a big step here moving forward over the course of this coming off season. And the challenge, and I'm sure maybe a little bit of pressure too as well for management, is finding the right guys to surround them with, because I think you've got a good group, a good culture going here for the younger players that have been around the last little while. And you know what, they want to start winning, and I think they deserve to have the right pieces surrounded by them with to be able to do that.
Well, you just said the word right there, so I'm going to bring this up. How much is culture a factor for NHL teams? I mean, we're talking about the Senators right now. I want to get into the Sabres in a second. But how much does this factor in? Because a lot was said about owner Eugene Melnyk over the last several years, but really it comes down to the players and what they do on the ice. So how much does this culture thing really factor into the results a team can get?
Yeah, it's hard for me to give a definitive answer just because I'm not there, but certainly you can see reasons why that is a factor. And I believe certainly having it in the room is one thing, but just the culture as an organization is such an important thing. Like I remember, Luc Robitaille, when he came to Detroit there towards the end of his career, that 2001-02 season where they won the Stanley Cup, and he was part of things there, and he was just so blown away that anytime he needed anything, the staff members were there for him. And, the answer was always like, hey, like, we're all in this together. Like, it's all, we're all doing this to win a cup at the end, right? Like that was continually the mindset there. And just whether, you were someone that worked in marketing, whether you were someone that worked on the communication side or whoever, equipment staff, strength and conditioning, like that was all where their heads were at. And I think that permeates down to the players, and I think how you carry yourself and onto the ice. I mean, I remember having a conversation with Mark Borowiecki when he was still with the Senators a couple of years ago, and he was talking about, just the need to have that. Like, it doesn't matter who you are when you come to the rink, whether you're a player, you work as a staff member, you treat everyone respectfully. You say thank you, and you treat everyone as a part of what you're trying to do beyond just the players in the room. Like, you're all still part of the common goal. So you do get a sense of, and it starts, with ownership too, and having the right culture. And you see, good ownership oftentimes will win. And I don't think there's a coincidence there. So I believe that is invaluable. And, what's the formula for finding it? I don't believe there is one. But certainly it starts from identifying the right players. Obviously a big part of it is their talent and what they can do on the ice, but who they are as a person. And you see teams go through that every year with the scouting combine and in the draft, and making decisions based on all of those factors. And so that's why I think someone like Trent Mann, the head scout with Ottawa, and his staff has done, for the most part, a really wonderful job here of late. Not only unearthing some gems late in the draft too, but just finding good people. By all accounts, they've got a good dressing room there, and players that all get along with each other, and that's what you want. So so long as I think as organizationally you've got that sort of mindset and culture, I think you've got a chance, and that goes a long ways towards getting and reaching your ultimate goal.
Well, it sounds like it really does play a key factor, and the Buffalo Sabres have gone through it. Now going to miss the playoffs for their 10th consecutive season. They've just gone through a lot in terms of the fan base over there. And I think the Pegulas are putting their best foot forward, trying to create a culture that will welcome new. I mean, the Taylor Hall experiment didn't work. Bringing in Eric Stahl in the offseason, you really thought that would have a huge impact on Jack Eichel and his perspective leadership and just his future. And I hope that he got some lessons out of those guys while Taylor Hall and Eric Stahl were there. But how much do you think culture factors in this situation to the Sabres? Because it seems like the Pegulas, they want to ice a winning team, but maybe they could use a little bit of help.
Yeah, totally. Right. And finding the right people to put in place there, right? Because you think about the carousel that they've had, whether it's head coaches or GMs, there's been a lot over the last little while here where they've, endured this lengthy playoff drought now. Right. So I think that all goes into the conversation. It's tough when you're continually losing like you are. And you remember a couple of years ago when Ryan O'Reilly admitted, he'd lost love for the game at times. And I remember hearing, about Zach Bogosian and the lead up to where they eventually terminated his contract mutually, and he signed with Tampa, and worked out great for him. He wins a cup that summer, but even he didn't have the same love for coming to the rink that he used to, and that's difficult. It's tough to still have that feeling when you're losing as much as you do. But I think culture does have play a big role in that too, and having the right people in place to make sure the message is consistent, and that people are being held accountable for their actions. And I don't know what all goes on in Buffalo. Of course, I don't have any insight there, but you can just tell that there's still a lot of issues to be worked out, because certainly at times you look at them on paper and you think, well, they should be a team that's better than they are. And certainly going into this year, you thought that, maybe they were going to be able to finally put it together, and it went the other way in a completely incredible fashion. So it's, again, it's a tough one to really put a finger on in terms of saying, well, this is how you have to do it. But they haven't found it there yet. So, from an ownership level on down, it seems like the search is on for finding the solution there.
Well, there's a third person now that has now come out and said, a third player, I should say, former player, Josh Georges, who we just had on the other night on our Habs Tonight show. And he mentioned culture and just losing a bit of his love for the game. That's three players now, Kyle, that have said that. And that can't be encouraging in terms of at least the current situation, to hear that on repeat. Right,
exactly. And so at some point, if you're somebody in charge, whether, again, you're the owner or you're the GM or the coach, I think there's got to be some sort of accountability there of going, okay, what are we not doing here? Like, what are we missing? Right. And maybe that's gone on. You hope it has, that there is some, real inward conversations that people there are having. But, the worst thing you can do is to just, assume that, well, it's not an issue here. We've got to find, the right roster construction here, and, one bounce here and there, and we're going to sort it out. Right. So that's all part of it. But when you hear, again, as you said, players like that, of that caliber and that have been around that long say stuff like that, that tells you what's been going on there. And if you're playing for a team that over time you end up losing the love for the game, that's a big problem, right? You should be having the time of your life, by and large, playing this game and being able to experience so many cool things. The fact that you're losing love for the sport that you fell in love with as a kid, it's disheartening to hear, and certainly alarming for a team that just seems so far off being one that is a legit franchise again, that's contending for a playoff spot. And it's too bad, because, as you know, Andrew, they've got such a passionate fan base there that deserves so much better. And it's great to at least see the Bills starting to have some success there and some energy there that wise. But it's a great sports town that just right now does not have a hockey team they can be proud of again yet.
Yeah, well, it's the same owner, so it's
yeah,
it's just kind of baffling in that sense. But I mean, Kevin Adams, I've watched him. They've put on a series about, they showed how they drafted Jack Quinn and just kind of try to give fans more of an insight into what's going on in the organization. And they even showed a video of them acquiring Taylor Hall. They showed that process and what that looked like. So they're trying to have some more transparency, but it just seems like maybe some humility now is needed in terms of just laying some control down and just maybe trusting some new hockey ops folks to give them a hand. I mean, if anyone wants to succeed, it's them, and they maybe just need to reach out, and that wouldn't be a bad thing.
Yeah, we're going to have a lot of time to think about it here over the course of the off season, right? So it'll be interesting to see what they look like come September.
Yeah. So the Toronto Maple Leafs, this is where I'll kind of end off here with you, Kyle, just because, you get to cover a lot of Toronto Maple Leafs hockey. And I think Leafs fans are really curious and nervous, anxious, excited, maybe every emotion that there is about what's going to happen in this upcoming playoff run here. Whether or not they play the Canadiens, the narrative is that this team hasn't got past the first round since 2004. But with the additions they've made over this offseason and even trade deadline, all signs point towards everything's been put in place by Kyle Dubas. So is it really on him at this point if they can't break through that first round this year?
Ooh, all right. Yeah, certainly. I think it's on everybody. Because I believe Kyle Dubas has done a great job in building the roster the way he has this year. Right? Like, that you could find holes the last couple of seasons in their lineup, We'll see what the goaltending situation looks like when the playoffs roll around. What kind of shape is Freddie Anderson in? I believe once the playoffs do start, Jack Campbell is your guy, at least to start with. That's really the only question mark for me. I'm not saying that they've got the best defense in hockey by any stretch, but it's certainly a lot better, and they're playing a lot better in their own zone. So I think it would be on everybody if you have another first-round exit. And I believe that they're a team that's capable of extending things a little more here this year. I just think that, in years past, the things that drove fans crazy, that drove coach crazy, that frustrated the players, you're not seeing that much anymore. The highs have gone much longer than the downs this year. They've had a handful of lengthy winning streaks, or at least, streaks that were giving you points every game. So all of that considered, and the fact that you've got some superstars there that are doing, well, a bona fide superstar in Austin Matthews and some other stars in Marner and Nylander, and even Tavares has had a really good second half of the year. That all factors into it too. And I remember having a conversation early in the season with Jason Spezza, and he made the point that he gave Kyle Dubas a lot of credit and just how he's filled the roster out, not only in terms of how they're playing and identifying the right players to go on the right spots, but also just, we mentioned culture, just the dynamic in the locker room. He said, there's more life in the room this year. There's more energy. There's more talk. You've got some older guys that have been around that, get the conversation and keep things going and keep things light. He just said that there's a much better vibe in the dressing room this year than when he first came in here a season ago. So I just think that, they've got a team that's ready to break through. They have every right to feel confident. They have every right to believe when they look at whoever the other three teams in the North is that end up making the playoffs, to, although it's not going to be easy, to look at and go, there's no reason why we shouldn't be the best team that emerges from this. They've proven that to be that team throughout the regular season. And again, it's another thing to do that in the playoffs. But I believe, for the first time, really since under the Kyle Dubas, Brendan Shanahan era, they are equipped to do so. This is the best team they've assembled in a really long time here.
Well, it feels that way, right? And the more you watch them, the more you have that sense. Even when the Canadiens beat them like a week and a half ago or so, I just felt like at any point in time during that game, the Leafs could still just turn it around. Like they just seem to have that ability to turn a game on its head, just given the depth and the talent that they have.
I agree, right? So, and you add Nick Foligno into the fold. I just think they've got depth upon depth, and they're prepared for any scenario. I like the fact that Sheldon Keefe isn't afraid to just try different things with his lines and his D pairs. And his rationale is always, I like to know what I have going into the playoffs. I don't like surprises. So if an injury comes up or a line just isn't working, at least he's got a plan B, C, and D and say, well, we did have these three guys or these two guys together at a certain point in the regular season, and this happened and it worked well for us. So you've got that to lean back on. Seems like they're doing a great job and being as prepared as possible here for the playoffs. And, the players are taking care of things on their end in terms of, playing at a high level going in. I think about to the 2018 and 2019 where they scuffled a little bit down the stretch, but their playoff spot was already locked up virtually for a while. It didn't quite hurt them, and you knew that they were locked into that 3 spot where they were starting on the road in Boston. But again, the fact that they weren't exactly on a high going in, or on some sort of stretch where they were playing pretty hot. I think that does play a role in when you first start the postseason and being in the right frame of mind. So they're in a much better place here, I think, this year, and I believe that they're capable. I'm not saying they're going to win the whole damn thing, but they've certainly been. They're in a position, I think, to at least go deep better than they have at any other point, certainly this century.
Yeah, well, it seems that way, and I just hope that whatever happens to that team, and it's easy for me to say as a Montreal fan, I try to be down the middle as much as possible, and I have respect for their team, and the fans are just eager for a breakthrough finally here. But I just hope that it doesn't come down to with goaltending, and then say it doesn't work out in either the second or third round, for example, and then it all the weight goes on Jack Campbell or even Freddie Anderson's shoulders. I would hope that the goaltending wouldn't take the brunt of the blame if that were to happen. Right.
Exactly. You never want to see one person having to shoulder all of it. But you just never know. As I say, that's the one area where you're still not quite certain about. Now, the fact that how Campbell has played after a little bit of a dip there has been very encouraging, right? Yeah, but he's just never been in the playoffs before. So until you get there, you can't say for certain. But clearly he's been a wonderful story, a wonderful person to interact with, to hear from, and his teammates love him. And I just think whether it's him or Frederik Andersen, who also has incredible respect in that locker room, whatever they end up going with and how things shape out, I think they should feel pretty good, right? Anderson's had a tough year, but at times, but I think this team as a group will find a way that that won't end up being the ultimate downfall if they do end up coming up short.
Well, this is my first episode of the newly branded Drew Dekes Show. Kyle, you still know me as Andrew, so anybody can still call me Andrew. I always say that too. But yeah, no, it's been a blast as always to catch up with you and talk some hockey right here in the middle of this final playoff push. So thanks for coming on this first episode. I didn't see anybody else being the first guest, so certainly appreciate it as always, my man.
All right. I'm flattered you thought of me, man. Good to be on with you.
All right, folks. Well, thanks for tuning in also. And be sure to follow Kyle on social media on Twitter at SN Kyle Bukauskas. I don't know if you changed your handle. I know you did on Instagram recently, so I want to make sure I got that right.
Yes.
So, but anyway, yeah, Kyle's a great follow and just a great guy just to encourage anybody who's looking to get into broadcasting as he has me. So here we are. And thank you so much, my friend. And we'll talk again soon, I'm sure.
All right, man. Be well.